gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Are you ready to pop your cork? In the left corner at 6'4", 242 pounds, with a record of 45-0, the undisputed.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Will.
Hey, how many bottles of wine have you had?
Well, Will, it's not the wine. I'm just so excited about the podcast.
Yeah, I am too. This is not a boxing match. This is We Know Texas Vino.
Salute.
Welcome, all you Texas wine lovers. I am your host, Will, and we're coming to you at Coordinate Vineyards in Hye Texas, right?
Sort of. Coordinates.
Coordinates.
Vineyards.
Sorry.
There you go. Okay. S on Coordinates, S on Vineyards.
Yes, Coordinates Vineyards.
And yes, we are here in Hye Texas.
Awesome. And we have Austin Kerr here with us. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us. So before we get deep into the show here, what are we drinking right now?
Great. So I started you guys with a glass of our sparkling brut this morning, which is a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc out of Robertson in South Africa.
I've never had a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc before.
Surprisingly rare. Like, I've been looking for other examples of it, but it's one of those things where Napoleon decreed in 18 whatever, you can only use these grapes for that champagne, and then everybody follows France. So it's been an overlooked grape for sparkling wine, which is crazy because that acidity that it's known for is one of those things that helps sparkling wine. And I think it's absolutely fabulous. It's been one of our best sellers. So.
It definitely is amazing. Again, like I said, I've never had a Sauvignon Blanc. I've had Albarino. I've had Blanc de Bois. I've had Pinot Grigio. I've just never had one of those. Actually, I've had a Trebbiano one too. I had that one last night.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely an interesting taste on the palates. Yeah.
Much more common in South Africa to see like traditional champagne grapes. So Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, or Chenin as their sparkling. So Chenin is the grape that South Africa is like most known for.
That's Chenin Blanc?
Chenin Blanc, yeah.
Man, I can go for some Chenin Blanc too.
Yeah, we can try that later.
I love me some Chenin Blanc, So, well, real quick before we get into the meat of the show here, I'm going to talk about our social media. So you can find us on Facebook at We Know Texas Vino. And you can also find us on our website at weknowtexasvino.wine or .com. And then, of course, you can find us on any podcasting platform. And if you find us out there, give us a 5-star rating. Give us some feedback because we love hearing what you have to say about the show. If you have a winery suggestion or even a topic that we need to cover for education, please let us know. We love hearing about this. So you're listening to We Know Texas Vino, episode 70, at a beautiful place called Coordinates Vineyards. I got it right that time, did I?
There you go.
So Austin, again, thank you for having us out here.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I had posted on Facebook about us coming out here, and you were one of the first people that reached out to me and said, hey, come out here and do an episode with y'all. Yeah. And your story is absolutely phenomenal.
Thanks.
It reminds me of another story of another winery. We'll talk about that later. But can you tell everybody how you decided to get into wine first, and then we'll come into the naming.
Sure. So that actually goes way, way back. There was a time when I was like 19. So I was still in university. I was working in a pharmacy. And I don't know where this idea came from, but I had this sort of fantasy of like owning a castle in Chile surrounded by vineyards. And I just had this image in my mind. Like I even made it in like Google SketchUp when it first started. I just had this idea.
I think that's everybody's dream.
You'd be surprised. So there was a day where I just like called in sick. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to work. And I went and shadowed a winemaker in Oregon. Of course, I wasn't old enough to drink the wine, so he wouldn't let me try any of the wine.
Right.
But I've always had like a really strong science background. So for me, like being in the lab and seeing what they were doing there was fascinating. And he offered me a job for the harvest, but it was, minimum wage, which was like $4 an hour back then. And,
right.
I was making so much more in the pharmacy that I couldn't ever swing it.
Right.
But I always wondered kind of what would have happened if I had, started my wine journey that early, because it really took me a while to get back to it.
Right. And I think everybody has that. I know for me personally, I never knew how much I really liked wine until I drank it and then found the fascination in it. And I think, once you find that fascination into becoming a winemaker, you just kind of like, it sticks with you. You don't want to do anything else but that now. And I like how you start out your story like that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's always kind of been there in the back of my mind, but there's a lot of choices we make in life, a lot of them around economics and things.
Yeah.
And, winemaking is a tough choice to make for a lot of people. The economics really don't add up in a lot of different ways.
Right.
So it's a passion, or it's a labor of passion, as opposed to being one where you really plan on making a fortune.
Right. And I think a lot of people who actually do this that I've talked to, it's not about the money. I mean, money does help make everything better, but it's actually the friendships and the connections that you make in the industry.
Yep. The connections for sure.
Yeah. It's because I know for my personal self, I mean, the connections I've made doing this podcast is just phenomenal, because I've made some really, really good close friends out of this that I would have never made if I was still in IT.
Yeah.
Because I'm an introvert there. So
that's interesting. I often say that as well, that I'm generally an introverted person, and the job that I do requires that I'm not that way.
Yes.
And I can do it. It's draining.
Yeah.
It really takes a lot out of you to be on all the time.
Yeah. It's kind of funny if the first time I went to a wine festival to introduce the podcast by myself, not with Michael. And so I'm walking around and I'm like, just handing out my flyers and say, hey, you should listen to this podcast. You should listen to this podcast. But if we were talking about anything else, I would have never walked up to you whatsoever. I just looked at you and just bypassed you, just kept on going. So that's what I love about wine. It opens doors where doors would never been opened before.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah. So my journey in wine sort of started then. That was like the first experience that I had with it. But then I went back into the world of medicine. So growing up, I grew up in a medical family. My dad was a chiropractor, my mom's a nurse, my brother's a doctor, and my uncle's a dermatologist. Like, that was the world that I knew growing up. It's absolutely amazing what I can fix with a medical kit, because that was the tools that we had available, right?
Okay. So I've got this weird little... No, I'm just kidding.
Right. I should ask my brother about that. I don't think he's ever been to a wedding where somebody didn't expose themselves.
Part of me wants to go down that journey, but we'll wait on that one.
Oh goodness. So I was on board with medicine all the way through. I got into medical school in California. I got accepted to Western University of Health Sciences in Pomona. And it wasn't until I actually got into school that I realized that I really didn't want to do that. Right. Anatomy was disgusting. We had all these professors that basically spent the first semester teaching us how to not get sued, which was the primary focus. Was like, how do you do this job without losing everything? Right. But that was not why I wanted to go into medicine. Like, my goal was always to try and help people. Right. So I realized that might not be the best way to do it. Unfortunately, the time that I was there, I left school in 2008, which was the financial crisis. So it was a brutal time to try and find like a real job that was going to pay back my student loans. So I spent about maybe 8-10 months looking for like real work after that. Like, I interviewed with Merck and with Roche to do like drug trials. So all medically related things. But I mean, there was one job that I applied for where it was like there was literally one job and 5,000 applicants for that job.
Oh man, I've been there, done that. It sucks.
It was brutal, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was just the wrong time to be trying to look for meaningful employment in the U.S.
Right.
So I kind of looked at my life, and I wasn't married, didn't have kids. There was nothing really keeping me in the U.S. And I studied abroad twice when I was in university. I've traveled quite a bit. So I thought, well, hey, maybe this is a time to look for somewhere else in the world to go and see what's possible. So the big issue there is visas, right? Like, you can't just go to Australia and get a job, but you can't go to the UK. Right. But if you're willing to teach English, that opens up a lot of opportunities for places where they need English teachers. Okay. Which at the time that I was looking was mostly in Asia. Now there's more like, I mean, I guess China's still Asia, right? But China was a big player now. They weren't really then. Dubai has come into the scene as well. But when I was looking, it was basically Japan, Korea, or Taiwan. And of those three, Taiwan had the best like income to cost of living ratio. So I thought I could save more money if I went there and try and pay back my student loans. Okay. So that's what I did. Sold my car and bought a plane ticket and went to Taiwan with the hopes of finding something a little bit more sustainable.
And you're the second person I've heard said that going to Taiwan was more financially sound than any other place. In fact, I ran across a gentleman the other day that said he owns a house and 2 Airbnbs in Taiwan, and he pays less than $5,000 a year for them. And I'm like, and he actually showed everything to me. I mean, he showed all the bills and all that. And I'm like, this is insane. I don't know where in Taiwan he was at, but it was pretty cheap. I mean, I didn't believe him either.
Yeah. But that's interesting. So Taiwan is, it's a pretty like, I used to call it like the Canada of Asia. Like everybody's literate, right? Like 98% of the people go to university. I mean, it's like incredibly smart people, right? Upper middle class. A lot of families own their own homes, but it's a tiny island. It's 98 miles by 198 miles.
Wow.
So land is incredibly valuable. When I was there, I was living in an apartment, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in a like a high rise kind of thing. It was 23 stories high.
Wow.
Okay. And so there were hundreds of apartments in there. The apartment that I lived in, if I wanted to buy that, would have cost around $500,000 for that apartment. Okay. But to rent it was $450 a month.
Wow. I haven't paid $400 in rent since the 90s.
Right. So like, because home ownership is so high, what typically happens is like grandparents will buy an apartment for the grandchild when they're born with the intention of they will have it, 20, 25 years later, right, when they get married. And until that time, they'll rent it. So they're buying it 20 years early, renting it for that, and they don't really like the rent is just, whatever. They're buying it for their grandchild to have.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that it's really expensive to buy, but it's really cheap to rent.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the gentleman that I talked to, he makes like, he said he makes like 50, 60,000 a year living over there. And that's what he does. That's all he does. He doesn't do anything else. Wow. So I don't know how much, I don't know how much of that's true. I mean, he showed everything to me on his phone while we're sitting right there. So again, I don't know the full details, but it's just very interesting that you went to Taiwan and did that. So, so you go to Taiwan, you get situated there. So what ended up bringing you into the wine industry then? Because you've already started it back here in the States.
Yeah. So I already had kind of like the interest in the back of my mind, but I went to Taiwan to make money, to pay back my student loans, really. So I was looking for gainful employment. So I went there to teach, really, and did an interview before I left, like over Zoom, and I got hired at this school just outside of Taipei. So I arrived and sort of made my way to this school to get there. And when I get there, I'm the only American. There was one Canadian guy, there was one British guy, and there were like 15 South Africans who'd been there for 10 years. So they sort of immediately became my friend group because everybody else speaks Chinese. They're the only people who speak English. So we spent a lot of time together. And they helped me get a phone in Chinese and learn about like restaurants that I could eat at and things around town. And through them sort of started to learn about South African culture and the food and the language and of course the wine. So they were sort of my introduction to South Africa.
Interesting. And when you think of South Africa, you don't think about wines.
I mean, I do. Well,
I mean, you do. But I mean, to me and to a lot of people, that we don't think about wines. We think about lions and tigers and desert,
I mean, that's like not South Africa.
I mean, that's yeah. But, when I think of it, from everything I've ever watched, excuse me.
Like the desert part, like you're thinking like Sahara, right? Which is like super far from where South Africa is. But literally on the back of all of our bottles, we have a map of Africa with South Africa in red.
Really?
Just to like point out, like where is South Africa? Here's one on the back of this. And I do that because, a lot of people in the U.S. might think that South Africa just means the southern part of the continent of Africa, as opposed to like the country of South Africa.
Gotcha. Okay. So again, complete misconceptions. I always thought, South Africa was a lot of desert stuff. In fact, any shows that I've watched, like for example, one of the shows I love to watch was The Long Way Down. I'm an avid motorcycle rider, and Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor did a motorcycle ride completely down south to Cape Town. And a lot of their travel was through desert, and that's what they showed. And so that's what I assumed was South Africa. So I'm glad. Thank you for that clearing that up for me.
Yeah, it's surprising. The first time that I went there, I was kind of struck by how similar it looks to California. There's palm trees everywhere. The weather is very similar. Like it has, I don't know. When I lived in LA for a little while, like for me, my uniform was sort of a t-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops. Like that was just like the California lifestyle.
Okay.
And that fits very well into South Africa.
That's interesting. So you started learning about the South African culture and you started learning about the wines. So what really just fascinates you about South African wines?
For me, I've always looked for places where there's value, right? Like value has always been interesting to me. And in South Africa, they have incredible quality. Like the quality of the wines there is just phenomenal. I mean, some of the best in the world. But it's a value because the economics of it hasn't kept up, right? Like if those same wines were being made in France or Italy, they'd be thousands of dollars a bottle. Wow. But because they're in South Africa and their economy is just garbage, I mean, it's been tough for them for a long, long time. So the value of the rand doesn't hold, and there's so many challenges in South Africa that they have to deal with because of that. Like they have this rolling blackouts around the country that have been going on for years and years and years called load shedding. So they're like scheduled blackouts because their electrical grid can't handle the demand.
Wow. That's interesting. Again, stuff that we don't know about that over here.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So did you actually end up traveling over to South Africa?
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course.
So which will lead into my next question. So go ahead and let's talk about your travels in South Africa.
Okay, sure. So actually there's an interesting piece kind of between those two. So when I first arrived into Taiwan, I meet all these South African friends. Like I really focused on trying to learn how to teach because that was something I'd never done before. So my goal was to become a better teacher. So the wine was sort of an accident along the way, and it's weird kind of how it happened. So one day I'd been there for probably about 2 years, and I'm writing my lesson plan for the day, and the teacher, the South African guy sitting next to me, is writing his lesson plan for the day. And at the top, he wrote like a little note to himself that said, "Give Ross $1 million."
Okay.
I was there to pay back my student loans, right? So I noticed that right away. I was like, What's this about? Like, who's Ross and why are we giving him $1 million?
Right. Okay. My name be Ross.
So it turns out that the guys who'd been there for a while, they were involved in kind of like this import business where they were buying wine from people that they had gone to school with. So in South Africa, Stellenbosch University, Stellenbosch is kind of like their Napa Valley. Okay. And the university is pretty much in the center of the town. And that university is very similar to our UC Davis. Okay. That's where everybody goes to study wine and enology, viticulture and enology and all those things in South Africa. But it's a university, so obviously you can study other things as well.
Right.
So a lot of the people that I knew in Taiwan had gone to Stellenbosch University and studied English and then went on to be English teachers. But while they were there at school, some of their friends had gone into viticulture and became winemakers and doing all those things. So they were basically buying wine from their like school buddies and bringing it to Taiwan and selling it in little bottle shops and restaurants and things like that.
Right.
So when I see this, give Ross $1 million, I'm finding out about this whole little investment thing that they have. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I've always been interested in wine. I'm so excited to do, like, I want to participate. Like, how do I get involved in what you guys are doing? And so the first question was, well, how much money do you have to invest? And I was, broke. So I literally had like $800 to my name. Okay. So I give my friend $800. He's like, kind of laughs at me. He's like, well, this is not enough to like do anything, but let me like put it in with my money and we'll just like account for it, you and me, Okay. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. So I give him my $800, and after really like four months, like it wasn't very long, the money comes back and now it's $1,200.
Oh, wow.
Like, wow, that's like a great return. This is fantastic. Yep. And I was looking at trying to get into stocks and things like that to save up some, because I was really in quite a bit of debt. Med school was crazy expensive. So this is going well. And he's like, okay, well, do you want to take out your money or do you want to do it again? It's like, let's do it again. That sounds fantastic. Yeah. So take the $1,200. And so 4 months later that comes back and it's more like $2,000. So it's like, wow, this is fantastic. So we keep doing it. Every couple of months we'd roll it over, do another investment. I even put more money into it.
Okay.
So after doing this for maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe 2.5 years, something like that, I had about $20,000 saved up.
Wow. Okay.
Which was a lot. Like that was a significant amount of money to put towards my student loans.
Okay.
So I was starting to think like, okay, maybe I should do that, or, somehow we got to get to paying those back, because it's been about 4 years that I hadn't paid anything. Right. And like, it just keeps adding up.
Somebody's getting angry now.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, right. Like over there, it's not like I was getting collection calls and things like that. And I knew a bunch of people who'd been over there who hadn't paid anything in a very, very long time.
Right.
But the issue is like when you need to renew your passport, or if you want to travel I didn't want to get stuck there. So I wanted to do everything the right way. Anyways, about this same time, I had a girlfriend when I was there who was a flight attendant.
Okay.
And she worked for Cathay Pacific. And one of the girls that started with her when she got hired there retired at the age of 27 to marry a guy she had met in Beijing.
Okay.
So kind of nice, right? The guy that she met was the son of a construction magnate who had built like the bird's nest for the 2008 Olympics.
Okay.
And they just finished like a big construction project at the new Beijing airport. I mean, this guy was big. Like his dad was big, right? Like 20,000 employees, member of the Communist Party. Like, I mean, to be that level in China is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But his son, what he wanted to do was kind of prove to his dad that he could open his own business. Like he had his own ideas and he didn't want to just follow in daddy's footsteps. He wanted to do his own thing. So his idea was to open this sort of coffee and wine bar. Like it was going to be coffee in the morning and then it would flip into like a wine bar at night in the Olympic Village, because they had some connection to like a place that was in one of the shopping malls there or something like that. So he knew a ton about coffee. He just didn't know anything about wine. And so he kind of reached out through his network like, hey, is there anybody that can help me source wine for China? So that came to me and I was like, yeah, I can do that. I had no idea how to do that. I really didn't know.
So you put your foot into it and you're like, I don't know what to do here.
I mean, I was reasonably confident that I could figure it out. So, he's like, okay, that's great. Like South African wine, that's different on our market. That's something new. I think that could go well. I don't know anything about it. Like, here's kind of what we're looking at. He's like, we need a cab. Like, go find me a cab. I was like, okay, I can do that. So I immediately went to the guys in Taiwan and I was like, hey, I got this opportunity. We can expand to Beijing. We're all going to retire as millionaires. This is going to be fantastic. And they sort of thought about it for a little bit. We had this fancy dinner afterwards and they decided to pass on it, that they didn't want to do it.
Okay.
And I was really kind of floored by that.
Right.
Like I wasn't expecting that at all, but they said, there's too many regulations. Like we're comfortable with what we're doing here. Like we don't know if we all want to change our lives and go do something else.
Right.
I was like, oh man. Okay. Well, just why don't you send me to the people in South Africa, and then I'll do it like on my own. And they're like, oh, well, if we send you to the guys where we're getting our stuff, well, then that's going to increase our prices. And, like that might not work. So we don't really want to do that either.
Right.
So I'm like, wow, you're really just leaving me out to dry here, huh? Like, they're like, yeah, well, if you want to do it, you got to do it on your own. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do it on my own, I got to take out the money that I have to make it work. So I withdrew my money that I had saved up and started working on my own. So I emailed and cold called and tried to find anybody on my own in South Africa that could help me. And eventually I did find somebody that was willing to work with me on those scales. And he's just like, okay, whenever you come to South Africa, I'll pick you up at the airport. We'll go to all these different vineyards and we'll see if we can find what you're looking for.
Okay.
And luckily my girlfriend was the flight attendant, right? So she had a flight booked to South Africa, like to work in 2 weeks. And I was like, sweet, I'll be there in 2 weeks.
Right.
Which kind of surprised him because that's not usually the speed that these things kind of work at.
Right.
So she works the entire flight down there, and I'm like sitting in business class, drinking champagne and watching movies.
Hard's life,
like, right? Because like I'm flying on a free ticket or whatever. And we land in South Africa, and immediately you have to go to the hotel. That's how flight attendants get paid. They get like in cash money for every country because it's always different.
Right.
So we went to the hotel and got the money and checked into the hotel, and then snuck back to the airport and flew to Cape Town.
Okay.
Because we weren't supposed to be like doing, like she was supposed to be resting for her flight back.
Right.
And I was like hijacking, basically. So we flew to Cape Town like early in the morning. We get picked up by this guy who's basically like a broker, what they call a negotiant, right? So he knows all these different people, and he can help put together an order, do the export paperwork and stuff like that. So we spend the day going around mostly Stellenbosch with him, and he's just taking this beautiful, I mean, amazing vineyards, but they're huge. You know, they've already got wines in the US. They already have wines in China. Like, I just know that that's not going to work with my $20,000. Like, I couldn't physically buy enough to compete on price with anybody like that.
Right.
So what I needed to find was like a small boutique producer that really wasn't available anywhere outside of South Africa. And so I tell him this like kind of halfway through the day. He's like, well, I wish that I would have known this earlier because, you know, we've wasted all this time. But I think I know somebody that'll work. It's a fifth generation winemaker who's been making wine on his family land for 150 years. And he's just over the valley in the next valley over in Parle. I was like, yeah, that sounds perfect. Like, let's go to this guy. He's like, well, let me call him and see if he's there, because he doesn't have like a tasting room. We just got to meet him at his house or whatever. So he calls up this winemaker and he's like, oh, you know, I'm not there, but I can meet you there in 30 minutes. Like, do you remember where it is? I haven't been there in a while. Or you haven't been there in a while. It's like, yeah, I think I know where it is. Right. So we drive over the mountains from Stellenbosch into Parle. Parle is named for this mountain that looks like a pearl, like this giant pearl stuck on the side. It's absolutely stunning. This was in August. So it was winter. It was kind of like lightly raining. And
wait a minute. You said August and it was winter?
Yeah, because they're in the southern hemisphere.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I'm still stuck in the northern hemisphere. Okay.
Yeah, so opposite climates there. So August was their winter time, which is the time that I happened to be there. And he calls up this winemaker. He's like, yeah, he's going to meet us there. So we go in through, like, we get over the mountains and we're driving on this road that's like a really rural road. Like there's no street names, there's no like stop signs, and like we're really in like the winelands of South Africa. Okay. But we're trying to get to a road that we think is going like the same direction as the one we're on, but there's a vineyard in the middle of us. So we're trying to like figure out how we're going to get on the other side of this vineyard. And we're driving along and there's like a tractor road through the vineyard. So it's like compacted dirt and stuff. We're like, oh, well, let's see if we can take this and get through to the other side. So we're driving down this like little tractor road for kind of a ways. Like the vineyards there, some of them are pretty big. And so we're driving along and then it kind of stops. Like it didn't connect through the vineyard like we thought it did, which is unusual. And so we're sort of in this situation where we now either have to back up all the way back to the road or try to turn around and get back to the road so we can get around the vineyard and back to the tasting room we're trying to go. Okay. But the ground there, like the terroir for that area in Parle, is all like alluvial clay for the grapes. So as soon as we try to turn around in the car, and he's in this like 94 Civic, right? Because it's South Africa. Like, you know, I mean, he had a car that was amazing. So we get off of the compacted dirt and immediately sink into the mud, like into the clay. So the tires are spinning. Like we're not going anywhere. We're like stuck. So this is not going well, and Anton's apologizing like profusely about all of this, and I'm like, hey, you know, we still got time, like it's gonna be fine, let's just call a winemaker, see if he can come help us. So he's calling him up. He's like, hey, do you know, we're stuck, do you think you can come help us? Well, where are you guys? And we're looking around, literally all we can see is grapes. You know, we don't know what road we're on, we don't know where anything is. It's like, how am I gonna help you if I don't know where you guys are? Like, how am I going to come and save you? And he's like, well, I don't know. So this is like going back and forth, mostly in Afrikaans. So I don't really know what's going on. Right. I get out of the car. I'm trying to like push it out of the mud. Like, that's not working. Literally covered in mud from like the nipples down. And so finally it was the winemaker who did this. Robert, he says, well, let me try this. And he gets the coordinates for his house. And he gives us the coordinates. And once you put that in, it'll show us like how to navigate there. Right. And that was kind of the first moment where the word like coordinates and the concept like came up to us. That a lot of what we try and do is go just a little bit further than anybody else would be willing to. Like take that extra step where the only way to get there is with the coordinates. Like there is no street address. And like literally there is no address to this guy's house. I've tried to send him thank you gifts and like the mail gets there because the postman knows who you are.
Interesting. Well, so while you're talking here, you know, I usually try not to get on my phone, but I just had to look this up. Okay. So I looked up Parle and just typed in Parle Vineyards and I'm looking at some of the photos here and absolutely gorgeous country over there.
Yeah.
I never would have thought that. Again, you know, my misconception, because I'm here in the States and what we see is what is available on our news media. And unless we have something that's interesting for us to point over that area to look, our misconception is what is provided for us, you know, and that's something that I love to debunk is the misconceptions. And I've had a lot of that this week. So, but the vineyards there are absolutely gorgeous and you would never, ever thought they were in Africa at all.
No, it looks more like France or Italy or Spain than it does, Africa or our conception of Africa.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out how to get over there now.
Yeah, it takes a very long time.
I may have to swim. I can't afford a plane or anything right now.
So it was a lot easier for me when I was living in Taiwan because there's a direct flight from Hong Kong to Joburg. So I could get there in about 11 hours from Taiwan. From here, it's more like 30. So most people go through either London or Dubai, and it's, you know, you got layovers, and that's 2 long flights. Like you got to fly over the continent of Africa.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, really why we don't know that much about South Africa. It is one, if not the most furthest place on earth that you could try to visit or try to bring wine from.
Right.
So it's why it's so poorly represented on our market.
Right. I know the first time I've ever taken a commercial flight. Are you ready for this one?
Sure.
I had to go to Malaysia.
Okay.
And it was 22 hours. That was my very first commercial flight ever in my life. And my first layover was over in Japan, Narita, and it was a 4-hour layover there.
Well. Yeah, and
then flew to Malaysia, and then from Malaysia, when I left there, I was there for a week, and then I flew over to not Dubai, Qatar, and then I had a 4-hour. I think it was a 4-hour layover because I left at Malaysia at 4 in the morning, and I left at 3 in the morning, and I landed in Qatar, at the same time, and I'm like, this is not right. I feel weird here. And then I left at 7 in the morning and arrived here in Texas at 5 in the morning or 5 in the afternoon. Yep. So I those long flights are killers, you know.
I've done a lot of them. They can be pretty tough.
So when I look at your label and you look at your sign, I notice there's actual coordinates on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, is that the coordinates of your tasting room or the coordinates of home?
So we try and use coordinates for everything. Like we want to tag everything with the coordinates of where they are. So our new location, which is where we're at right now here in Hye. So all the coordinates that you see around here point to the center of the vineyard out front, which is a Tanat vineyard. Whereas if you go to Main Street in Fredericksburg, our location there, the coordinates on that sign are that location there. And then each of the bottles are all tagged with coordinates as well. So you can kind of look and see where the wine is actually coming from.
That's fascinating. I would have never thought about doing. I mean, that, you know, because everybody needs their own little thing to say, make this unique about us. And doing that's actually really fascinating. Yeah. I would have thought, you know, my personal opinion about just looking at it, I thought maybe it was to your tasting room or even to home, because you know how everybody always wants to coordinate back to home. That's where you start everything, you know?
I've, over the last 2.5 years we've been open here, I've met a lot of people that have coordinates tattoos, you know, like they've gotten a tattoo on their body with coordinates of some meaningful place, whether it's home or, you know, a loved one in some way or another. And every single one of those people, I was struck by how connected they were to those coordinates, how meaningful it was to them. You know, that's not a tattoo like a butterfly, right? You know, it's something that is so deeply connected to to who they are as a being,
right?
So I feel like coordinates and with wine being essentially a moment in time, a moment in place trapped in a bottle, like terroir, the sense of place, right? Like we should all be striving to get as close to that as possible. So by giving you the coordinates of where the wine is actually coming from, that lets you help to experience it in a different way. Yeah.
So they could take those coordinates and drop it in Google Maps, and it would.
Yep. It's a little bit difficult to do it. Google likes to use the decimal format, and we use the minute second format, which is how I learned it when I was younger.
Okay.
So it's a little bit harder to get it in there, but if you play around with it, you can figure it out pretty quickly.
Very interesting, fascinating, very fascinating. I really like that. So what brought you then from South Africa to Texas, specifically here in Fredericksburg? What brought you here to land here?
Yeah, good question. So we've had a family ranch just outside of Fredericksburg for about 9 years now. So even when I was living abroad, whenever I would come home to see family, like this is where we would come to, right? Like I'd come home and stay at the ranch, and usually the whole family would come and meet here. And one of our favorite things to do forever has been to go wine tasting. So we've been coming back here and going wine tasting in the area for a long time, and really seeing the area change and improve and develop over that time. I mean, 10 years ago, there wasn't nearly as many out here as there are today. So it always felt like home to me whenever I came back to this area, that this was home. But really, my life was in Taiwan. I had a great job there, and the import things were going well. We did successfully end up importing into Taiwan. So I was into China. So I was doing containers of wine from South Africa to China for about 7 years there. And then the pandemic hit, and like a lot of people in the world, everything changed. So containers were not moving in and out of China. Their lockdowns were quite different than the ones that we experienced here. Like nobody was sitting at home drinking wine over there. So the entire market in China just collapsed over 4 months. Like the wine market just went from one of the best in the world to one of the worst. It was phenomenal. Luckily, we were kind of at a point where we didn't have anything in transport, and it was easy to withdraw.
Right.
I went back to teaching for a year, but just kind of thinking about, like that was a wild ride.
Right.
Like, what's next? Not anticipating that it was going to continue. Just thinking, I mean, really, like who knew in 21 what was going on? We were all kind of in a holding pattern. Like, what is the world going to look like next? So I actually called my brother. I called him for his birthday, and he was visiting one of the wineries around here, and was trying to get a bottle of white wine for his birthday, because he prefers to drink white, especially in June. His birthday's coming up next week. So, so I called him for his birthday. I was like, "Hey, happy birthday. What are you guys up to?" He's like, "I'm at this winery and I'm trying to get white wine, and they're sold out. Like for the rest of the year, there's no more white wine. Like, this is ridiculous. How can you run out of white wine in Texas in June?" Like, but that's where we were at that time.
Right.
And Texas is a rapidly growing market. And so supply and demand fluctuates, and it's hard to know. Anyways, it was his idea at that moment. He's like, "Hey, let's start a winery in Texas." And I was like, "Wow, you're drunk already. Okay, well, I'll talk to you later." But every time I talk to him, he's like, "Really, I think there's an opportunity here. We've always looked for a way to work together. This could be it. Like, let's just put a business plan together and see what the numbers look like." And he said that as if I knew what a business plan was or how to put one together.
Right. I don't even know how to do that.
So I had to learn. And a lot of this experience has been been like, okay, I know kind of what to do, but I don't have any idea how to do that. So how do you write a business plan? It's amazing what you can learn on YouTube.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, I spent probably a month trying to figure out what went into a business plan and how to do it, and put it together and looked at the numbers, and we said, wow, there's actually an opportunity here. And I think that was even, a better opportunity when we were looking at it than it is even today.
Right.
So it kind of made sense. And we're like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, where are we going to do it? So Texas is a very interesting wine region. It's one of the only places in the world, if not the only place in the world that I know of, where you can do like a legitimate high-end wine tasting on one block. Just on the block where we are in Fredericksburg, on Main Street in Fredericksburg. There's an Italian wine tasting place, legitimate Italian wine. Then there's one that does California and Texas. There's another one that does California and Texas. Serrano just opened, and then Ferris and Fletch. So we have Anderucci's, Ferris and Fletch, Serrano wines. We do South Africa and Texas, and then Six Twists, which does bubbles from all over the world, all on one block.
Nice.
And everybody might have like a little bit of Texas, but they're all bringing in things from somewhere else.
Right.
That is really unique.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Napa, it's all Napa.
Right.
You can't get anything else.
Right.
If you go to Piedmont in Italy, it's all Piedmont. Like every wine region that I know of only lets you do that. But in Texas, we have huge demand. We've got Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston, all within driving distance of Fredericksburg. So huge demand for these experiences. But Texas, as a wine growing region, we might have the fourth number of wineries now in the United States, like as far as for the state. So a lot of wineries, but we only have 9,000 acres of grapes. So we're not producing enough grapes to meet that demand. And it doesn't look like we're going to get even close to that anytime soon.
Right.
Which just makes it a very dynamic and very interesting wine region. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. Like even people that live in Texas say, oh yeah, I know we have Texas wine. Like you can go to Fredericksburg, you can go wine tasting. But I don't think people realize that you can go to Fredericksburg, you can go wine tasting, and you can taste Napa and Italy and like you're going to go to Untamed later. They do California wine from Monterey. It's fantastic. It's made by a South African winemaker here in Texas. It's amazing wine from California. Right. And that there's a place that does Washington State and Italy, and there's one that does Virginia, right?
Oh, wow.
I mean, there's such a unique opportunity here to be able to taste wine from all over the world in a true vineyard setting. And as far as I know, this is the only place in the world you can do that.
Right. And Texas is a very diverse state. I mean, I will tell you from what I have seen and read and stuff, we love to show off our wines and we want to show it off with other ones and say, hey, we are just as good as California or Italy or France. In some cases, we are not better than them now because, I mean, our terroir is going to be a whole different than what they've got over there. Plus, they may have vines that are 50, 7,500-year-old vines, where ours is still very young. and I made this what do you would call it? Comparison. You get a vine that's 5-year-old. It's kind of like you taking a 5-year-old child. They're still very immature. And then you take a vine that's 20 years old, that's been through a lot, that's more mature, has seen a lot more, and it's got a better flavor. So you got to excuse me. There's a lot of differences there, but I mean, we are in Texas. We are coming up. We are winning awards. Left and right with our wines. And you're right. We still have a lot of maturing to go. In fact, who was I talking to? I was talking to, I think, John Rivenberg. Texas wine industry is where California was in the 80s. We're still very young. We're still trying to figure out what we can grow here. And then you got people who are just randomly just pulling something in and says, I think we can grow this here. And they'll do it. In fact, actually here this week, I've already heard of 3 different varietals that I've never heard of before. And I tried it and I was like, okay, what is this? And they said, oh, this is a French varietal. Oh, this is an Italian varietal. And because of what they have there, we can grow it here. And I'm like, oh, okay. Excuse me. Sorry, folks. So it's still a big learning process that what we have going on here in Texas. And so it's amazing what we can do here.
Yeah. So we do South Africa and Texas wine. So, and we have a vineyard out in front, which I'll show you when we're done here. So we're definitely committed to Texas wine as well, and it's just a different kind of wine industry. It's quite unique, right? So a lot of the varietals that people are familiar with, either from the grocery store or other experiences in wine, they don't do as well in Texas as we would hope for. Right. And that's where you say we get, some other varieties that you might not be as familiar with. And that's one of the things that I think Texas does really well is that we're not trying to make a Napa Cabernet.
Right.
We're really not.
We're not Napa.
we're not Napa, and we really couldn't do it no matter what we wanted to do. Like, there is no way to make that possible here. But we're looking for other varieties and showcasing other varieties that people might not be as familiar with, but they are spectacular when they're done here.
Right.
So one of my new ones that we got, it was just bottled on the 15th of May, is our Pic-Pol Blanc.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness. It is fantastic, right? It's so bright. It's so fresh.
Yes.
Lip stinger, of course, is the
I was just
French
telling her about that yesterday.
and it's absolutely a fabulous wine for Texas, and it works so well here. But we can't really do Sauvignon Blanc, which is the one that people might be asking for or looking for. But the experience that they want is very similar to both of those wines, where it's the bright acidity behind it.
Right. So out of curiosity, with you able to have access to South African wines, have you actually taken South African wines and Texas, the exact same varietal, and have people do blind tastings? Like, can you pick which one's Texas and which one's South African?
I haven't yet. I would like to kind of grow towards having like a set box, I would love to have a wooden box, where it's like, let's say Syrah, right? And it's, a Syrah from Texas, it's a Syrah from South Africa. And I feel like we need that third piece there. Okay. So we started with Texas and South Africa, but the brand Coordinates intends to go out and find great value wines from other places in the world as well. There's been some challenges in doing that. Everything with wine moves slowly, but I've been trying to get wine from Spain for the last 6 months or so. And it takes forever to bring new suppliers online and things like that. But to have one from Texas, one from Spain, and one from South Africa, all the same wine, I think would be a fantastic way to do it. It'd be even better if they were all made by the same winemakers.
Oh yeah, so, yeah. That would definitely be an interesting tasting event. Do it all blind tasting. Say, can you pick which one is Texas and which one's from South Africa, which one's from Spain? That would definitely be a fun event to do. Yeah, I know we did a tasting a couple months ago on doing Texas versus Old World. So we got the Texas version, and then they got the Old World version of it. Yep. and did a blind tasting. Hey, you'll pick which one's Texas and which one's not. And it's kind of crazy how many people actually pick the Texas one
as their favorite.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, and again, I'm still very young in this whole wine industry myself. I've been only drinking wine for the last 5 years.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm still very young. So
you really dove in head first.
Yeah, that's what I do. It's all or nothing. You just don't go, half in and just kind of walk into the cold water. Just dive in and just get it over with. So there's still a lot that I'm learning about the wine industry. I know my palate has completely changed from what it was 5 years ago to now. And I love tasting wines from everywhere, get to know what you're drinking, because sometimes, you may find something from somewhere else that it's really, really good. And then you match it up with Texas and you're like, oh, okay, I can see and compare the differences in it. You can actually, and a lot of people who don't drink wine at our levels, I hate to say it like that, their palates are not refined enough. So when they drink something that's, let's say Tempranillo, okay, a Tempranillo from Spain and then a Tempranillo from Texas, a lot of times they don't taste the difference. But when we who are in the industry who are making wine and stuff, we could taste the difference. You could taste the soil, you could taste the air, you could taste the terroir. Let's just call it that as it is, So that's very interesting. And now I'm going to go back to the sparkling that you gave here.
Sure.
This sparkling Sauvignon Blanc, I've never drank a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc. Absolutely amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. And I wish somebody from Texas will make a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc. And
so I believe somebody just put in, or is intending to put in, a true traditional method sparkling facility here in Texas. Is it Elise Crisper?
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. So she's got an Albarino that's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. But until they're ready with that, there is no way in Texas to make a true traditional method sparkling wine.
Well, I think she has the riddling machine and everything.
Are they ready?
Oh yeah. They've been making it. Yeah. They made an Albarino that's absolutely, if you've not had it, go get it. It's absolutely gorgeous. She brought me a bottle and I cradled it at Twiga. And I didn't want to open it, and somehow it ended up open, and someone tried to run off with the bottle and I had to chase them down.
Yeah, I think most people are still sending everything to Rack and Riddle, which is the place in California that does it. But I'm a huge fan of sparkling wine. This one is the Sparkling Brut is probably what we drink the most in our family. We're doing another order from South Africa right now. So we're bringing another sparkling wine with actually two other ones. So we have a sweeter sparkling rosé that we're bringing that is absolutely fabulous. It sold out really quickly when we had it before. So we're bringing that, more of the Brut. And then we're going to bring in another high-end, like really high-end sparkling. It's all done in the traditional method. And we're going to get about 30 Jeroboams of that as well.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So you finally decided to land here in Fredericksburg because you got a ranch down here. You got family down here. So you bought a place downtown Fredericksburg.
Yeah, we don't own that place.
Oh, you don't?
We rent it.
Okay.
We found it. It had been empty for about 2 years just because of the pandemic and all that stuff. So the building that we found is fantastic. It is the first blacksmith shop from Fredericksburg. So the building was built in 1879. And it's small, but it's cute and intimate. It's got a great feel to it there. So we have rented that place. We've been there for almost 3 years now. And the property just sold, actually. So we should be continuing there for at least another 3 years.
Okay.
With some new owners that have just took over the property. But I think that's going to be good for everybody. So yeah, that space has been fantastic. And then we just opened up out here in Hye about 2 months ago, and we did buy this property. So we got this one at the end of last year.
Okay. So the house that we're in, it was like an old Victorian style house.
Yeah, it's 100 years old as well. So this one was built in 1924.
Wow.
It was the family home of the Dykey family.
Okay.
Which it had like an original homestead here from the 1800s. So it was 500 acres at one point, which included William Chris Vineyards, which is next door, and High Meadow across the street. So all of what we see around here would have been that homestead.
Interesting. Okay.
And well, if you have that much land that you need to take care of in 1924, and literally today there's still nobody that lives out here. So the only way to have enough people to help take care of that was to have a bunch of kids.
Right.
So they had 11 kids, which all lived in this house, 9 of which were boys, which is enough boys to start your own baseball team.
Well, I'm looking in the room.
Yeah, so they did. Yeah, it was the Dickey Bros baseball team that they started, and LBJ came to watch one of the games and all that.
Nice. That's I love hearing about history about this area.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here looking at this room that we're doing this episode from, and I'm wondering if they stuck all 9 boys in here. I wonder how many fights broke out.
I imagine there was a lot of bunk beds.
I bet there was. Oh man. So you actually just killed literally the next 2 questions that I had right there on my list. Excuse me, man. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So where do you see you're going in your future for coordinates? Where do you see you're going? So I know you got a vineyard in the front here.
Yep.
And I know you offer how many Texas wines here already right now?
I think we have 4 or 5 at the moment, with a few more on the way.
Okay. So are you doing mostly from High Plains?
I mean, almost everything in Texas, that's where the fruit is grown, right? So it's about 80% of the fruit in Texas is grown up there. So it's much more difficult to find things that would be hill country or one of the other AVAs that we have versus High Plains.
Okay.
Most everything we have comes from the High Plains, but of course the grapes that are here will be hill country.
Gotcha. So I see the vineyard that you have in the front. Are you planning on trying to get more property to get more vineyards going?
So we have more land at the ranch. We have about 40 acres out there, and I've talked to a couple different companies around here to see if we could put grapes out there. It's certainly possible, but it is expensive. The cost to prep the land and plant the grapes, we're looking at about $35,000 an acre to put that in, and then another $5,000 to manage that for the first couple of years until you're actually making. So the upfront capital costs are just extreme.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, where the ranch, I mean, it's great as a ranch because it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's about 2 miles down a dirt road, but we would never have like traffic there. Like people won't ever see it.
Right.
So there might be more value in planting somewhere where it's more accessible. I'm not sure yet. But this vineyard here that we have is sort of my first foray into that. And I'm really glad that it's as small as it is.
It's a lot of work.
Oh my God, is it a tremendous amount of work.
Oh man.
If I had 40 acres of grapes, I don't even know what I'd do right now. So this is a great place to start and, get our feet wet, doing that, make sure that we understand all the process before that. And then if we really need the space for the grapes, we can use the ranch, or we can look for something else. So not exactly sure which direction we're going to go with that yet. We'll see how I feel after this first harvest.
Right. So you got grapes come from the high plains. You got yours here. So where's your production room? Are you using Kerrville Hills or?
No, so we don't have a production facility yet. That's kind of phase 2 for development here.
Okay.
One of the things that we spend the most money on monthly is the storage of the wine.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's got to be cold storage and kept properly. And if we can bring that on site, one, it would be a lot more convenient, and it'd probably save us some money to do that. So at some point, we'll build a building that will be the cold storage and production facility and all that. But it's probably a couple of years down the road. So for now, we're working with different people. I'm talking to Rob at Pebble Rock.
Okay.
So Lydia there, which is his wife, is our vineyard consultant. So she comes to help with the vineyard in front, and she is spectacular. Like, it's like working with a grad student. I mean, she's so incredibly smart. And Rob is the same way. So I'm hoping that we can work together with him to do that. And I believe he uses one of the local facilities around here, but I'm not exactly sure if I'm allowed to say which one.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to say with them, but I mean, I know most people around here use like William Chris, or they use Slate Theory or Grape Creek. They use their facilities also to do their wines too. So
it's so expensive, right?
Like
the capital outlay to build that stuff. So most people will build with extra production in mind, so that they have a place to grow to, and then sort of lease it out. So there's a number of people that do that, and I think it's one of my favorite things about the Texas wine industry is the way that people do work together and help each other out like that. Yeah,
and that's I've made that comment on all of our episodes here that Texas wine industry, we're always helping each other out because. And this is a word that was dubbed by Rusty out at Breaking Bud. It's cooperation. So we cooperate with everybody, but it's also still the same competition. Because, I mean, you can get a Tannat and this winery down the road here can have a Tannat and come from the same vine, and it's still going to be a completely different wine because of the way y'all process it,
Yeah. I mean, wine is very, very subjective. So
yes.
It's almost a different wine from person to person, regardless anyways. When I first started here in Texas, I felt like, there's this great sort of idea that the rising tide raises all ships. Right. And when we started here in 21, 22, early 22, the biggest challenge in Texas wine was that people didn't know that this existed.
Right.
That's changed a little bit. I still feel like there's a lot of people in Texas that don't even know that this winery is here. I mean, if you're in Houston, if you're in Dallas, like you might not have ever even realized that this kind of terrain was here, that we could possibly even grow grapes.
Right.
So I think there's still quite a few people that don't know the extent of the wine industry that's here. But it's grown a lot over the past couple of years, and I'm starting to see that the competition is getting a little bit more fierce. So, I mean, my goal, my goal is always to work with everybody. I love referring people to other places when I find, like, if they come in and they do a tasting and they're like, oh, they really like this wine, and I know that they have something that might be similar to that somewhere else. Like I want to send them to that place because I want them to have the best wine experience that they can have, whether I'm providing that or anybody else. Like my goal is to help you on your journey in wine. But what I saw sort of at the end of last summer, particularly, so wine worldwide is down.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like significantly.
Yeah. Big time.
Up to like 30% in some places. And wine in Texas is down, and spending is down, and inflation is up, right?
Correct.
So we have less dollars going around, and we have more competition, and people are starting to get scared. That's what I saw. Like last summer, I started to see people, for the first time since I'd been in the industry, started to see people acting out of more competition than cooperation.
Okay.
where like on Facebook and things like that, people are saying like, if they're not 100% Texas, don't go there. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that I'd seen that ever. Because a lot of these places started, you know, like when you go back 20 years ago, the beginning ones, like they were bringing in California fruit to supplement the Texas fruit.
Right.
And now the Texas wine is good enough that we don't need to do that. We can do Texas wine on its own, which is how it should be. But there's, I don't know, I just sort of saw this change in mood, the shift. Mm-hmm. And I really think it's more economics than anything else. Like, you know, they're just hurting and sort of benefits them to do that. But I think one of the things that makes the Texas wine industry so interesting is that we have all these places that are doing, maybe we're doing Texas, we have a vineyard outside, but we're also doing South Africa.
Right.
What I didn't realize until we opened here was that there are some institutional things that are kind of against us because of that. Okay. So, for instance, you know the wine passport in Texas, right? Because the Hill Country Wine, you buy this little book and you get to go and you can do like, I don't know how many wineries participate, but a lot. And you have like the whole month to go, and everywhere you go, you get a free tasting. So we cannot participate in that. Oh, because we are not 100% Texas. Even though I've got vines in the ground and my expenses are the same as everybody else's, and we're contributing to the industry and all that, we're still not allowed to be a part of that.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. You know, so I don't know. We've just sort of recently come into this where it's like, wow, we're here and we're participating and we're paying the same taxes and everything that everybody else is doing. But this is the first time we've kind of bumped up against this bias where like, you know, yeah, you're doing everything, but you're still not as good as us. And I don't know about that. That doesn't hit with me the right way.
And I think some of that, and what I'm about to say here, I don't think it's just the wine industry that's like that. I think it's all of Texas industry, because we have a lot of people from California coming into Texas, and they're trying to reshape what Texas is when it comes to wines. Or not just wines, but just in general, everything. And as a native Texan, we fight back on that. We push back on that. And I think that's why that could be the issue there. Because I know I've talked to John Rivenberg, and we've discussed a lot of this really in depth. And I'm trying to be politically neutral on this whole thing, you know. Because there's some things that, you know, people come in and try to make changes, and they don't want that. Yes, you have Texas wines here. You do support the Texas wine economy and all like that. But some people are like, you know what? If you're not 100% Texas, you can't support us. Which our theory here on the podcast is we do want to make sure you support Texas wines. But if you have to support, you know, have other stuff come in, that's okay, as long as you're supporting the Texas wine industry, and you're doing that. Yeah, and that's, I believe in that.
So a lot of people sort of falsely assume that we bring in South African wine to mix together with the Texas wine. That's what we're trying to do. They're totally different. So our Texas wines are 100% Texas. Right. Our South African wines are 100% South Africa. Right. There's no mixing or changing them. Right. So we're representing kind of two different places there. And everybody else that I know is doing similar things. If you go to like Covington Hill Country, they do have one wine where it's Texas Tempranillo mixed with the Washington State Syrah. So the best of both worlds, right? But one of the things that I think has made the Texas wine industry better has been the introduction of wines from other places. Right. It has pushed them to increase the quality at a rate that I don't know that it would have happened as quickly as it did. Right. You know, so it's sort of forcing everybody to do better. Right. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, competition should be better for the consumer. Yeah.
There should always be some sort of competition, something to say, hey, you know what? I've got this wine right here from this place over here. I really like it. I want it to be better than this from Texas. Right. And I know there's a lot of winemakers that will get wine from other regions and even countries, and they will compare their wines to that because they want it to be better. Yeah. So yeah, it is in where we're at, it's a double-edged sword. Sure. Darned if you do and darned if you don't.
In some sense. I mean, I don't know that it needs to be so black and white. Like, I don't know that that the experience that you have here is different than an experience that you would have somewhere else. Like you can come and you can do Texas tasting if you want to. You can do a South African tasting if you want to. I probably have an equal number of people that come in that have never had Texas wine and have never had South African wine.
Well, this is my first South African wine right here.
There you go. Exactly.
Actually, it's my second one. I had that pineapple wine I was telling you about.
I'm not sure that counts.
Yeah, it's a free wine, so it really didn't count.
But I think we're just at an interesting moment and an interesting place in the world right now. And it's fun to be a part of it. And, I hope it continues to be as enjoyable as it has been, because one of the reasons that I got into this business was for the people,
right?
Not just the customers, but the employees and the other winemakers and people in the industry that I get to work with. I just think they're some of the best people that I've ever known in my entire life, whether they're 100% Texas or not. They're fantastic people, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time with this.
Yeah.
So before we're going to get ready to cut off over to do our education, we're going to take a small break.
Sure.
Where can people find you online and your locations here?
Yeah. So we've got two spots, one in Hye, Texas, one in Fredericksburg, Texas. You can find us online through Facebook at coordinatesvineyards.com, Instagram, which is the same, Coordinates Vineyards. Again, there's an S on the end of coordinates. That's the one people forget. And then our website is www.coordinatesvineyards.com. That's COORDINATESVINEYARDS.com. And there you can make a reservation at both the locations. You can check out our socials. You can check out the wines. You can buy stuff online. So the website is probably the best place if you're looking for information on us.
Nice. Well, Austin, it was very informative. Okay. Because first off, again, I'm not familiar with South African wine. Didn't realize South Africa has such a big wine region until just now. So I really appreciate that. And I love providing education. I hope this helps other people understand South African wine also. Yeah. But I do like what you're doing for the Texas economy also. We're going to make sure we're going to point that out as well. Because, you're not just the South African, you're also doing Texas stuff too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. We're doing both and participating in all the things. And it is crazy expensive to do so.
Yep.
Some of the stuff for the South Africa. So we should try the Chenin next, which is the grape that South Africa is most known for.
Okay. First
grape brought outside of Europe to be grown anywhere else in the world. Brought to South Africa 365 years ago.
Wow.
So very, very long history with wine in South Africa.
Interesting. So, well, we're going to take a small break. We're going to come back and do education here in just a few moments. We're going to actually talk about calories in wine and how there's no calories. There's been a debate going on for.
Remember, I studied medicine, right?
This is why you get this topic. So we'll be back in a few minutes, folks. Cheers.
Hey, this is Jeff Coe from TexasWineLover.com. We're here with Will, Michael, and Jen from We Know Texas Vino.
And this is Amy Nemec with the Texas Wine Lover mobile app. We're wrapping up the interview and moving into the wine education portion of the episode, so stick with us.
Welcome back, everybody, to We Know Texas Vino. We're out here at Coordinates Vineyards. I'm not going to lie, I kept saying coordinates the whole time.
Coordinates is fine. That's how I refer to it.
Okay.
We're here at Coordinates.
So we're out here. We're actually doing probably my favorite part of the podcast, and it's actually the education. And so there's been a big running debate with people who are not in the industry, just normal people, and a lot of weight loss people and people who are watching the calorie counters and wine drinking. Are there calories in wine? I mean, I'm going to give you my perception of this whole thing. So there's no carbs because there's no sugar in it.
Okay.
I mean, if you're getting a dry wine, there's no sugar in it. I mean, if there is, it's very minimal. Very minimum.
Less than 2 grams per liter is a dry wine.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm thinking if there's no sugar in it, there's no sugar, there's no carbs, there's no calories in it.
Okay.
So I
plan.
chose this topic just because of your background and your family background. Okay.
Sure. So I am an absolute science geek. I used to be in the medicine world. Now I call myself a cork dork. So I just anything about wine. Well, anytime that there's an intersection of art and science, that's what excites me. So like I play the guitar, and I just absolutely love how guitars are designed and they work, because it's science, but it's also art and beauty. And wine is the same way, where it's this intersection of science and art. You can be an amazing, scientifically accurate winemaker and make a terrible wine. You can be an artistic winemaker and make a terrible wine.
Right.
You have to have both to do it properly.
Yep.
Okay, so calories in wine. Let's start with what a calorie is.
Okay.
Do you know what a calorie is?
I'm not a science person, so I can't tell you what it is. I just know that you got to have like 2,500 to maintain.
Sort of. Okay.
Or 2,000 a day.
So a calorie is a measure of energy.
Okay.
Specifically, it is the amount of energy that it takes 1 cubic centimeter of water to be raised 1 degree Celsius.
Okay.
Okay. So typically we would do that by burning things, right? Okay. So when they measure something for the calories that are in it, they put it into this machine and they combust it, they burn it.
Okay.
And they measure how much the water has changed temperature by the fire created by that thing.
Okay.
Okay. So if you had, say, a hot dog and you burn the hot dog, right? How much is that little cube of water going to increase? So if it increases, like over, I think it's about time as well, because we're going to radiate the heat out of it. But there might be like 500 calories in a hot dog, which means that it could raise 500 milliliters of water 1 degree Celsius by burning that hot dog.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm going to shake my head. Yes. But
So,
yes.
So there's energy in a hot dog, right?
Yeah.
And
So
we
you
can
burn the hot dog in it, and however it burns, how long it takes to heat that water up. Gotcha.
Okay. So let's talk about like a rock.
Okay.
Okay. Can you burn a rock?
I mean, with the proper fuel, yes.
Kind of. You could melt it.
But
is it going to combust?
No.
No. So there's no calories in a rock.
Okay, I know what I'm wanting tonight for dinner.
Which is why we don't eat them, right? Exactly. Okay. So could you light alcohol on fire?
Yes.
Okay. So it has energy.
Okay.
So it's going to raise that temperature, right?
Right.
So there are calories in alcohol.
Man, listen to this man. I just lost an argument without having an argument.
Right. Like there absolutely are calories in alcohol. There's quite a few of them, actually. So this is an interesting kind of phenomenon. Wine is the only consumable product in the United States without a nutritional label.
And I've noticed that. And I've looked at all the labels and stuff, and none of them actually says, hey, here's how much sugar, how much is, salt or sodium, or here's what's all inside of it. And in fact, actually, in some cases, some wineries will actually list what grapes were used on it and what chemicals were used in it.
Sure,
exactly. Let's just say that chemicals, because we all know what goes in it.
So I would prefer the term additives.
Additives, yes.
So there are 79 additives in the United States that you can add to your wine that do not need to be declared on the label. So the things that we do need to have on the label are like how big the bottle is, what is the alcohol percentage of the wine, what category is the wine, is it white wine, is it red wine, is it rosé wine, and that it contains sulfites. So all wine is going to contain sulfites. Right. There are a couple of segments in wine that are growing, and almost everything else is declining at the moment. One of the segments that is growing is what they call 0-0 wine, or low alcohol, low calorie wine.
Okay.
So remember, if you can light alcohol on fire, it's got calories in it, right?
Okay, right.
So we can't have a low calorie wine unless we have a low alcohol wine.
Okay.
Right. Even though it doesn't necessarily convert the same way that sugar does, alcohol does break down into complex carbohydrates in your body. So it becomes used like sugar does, which is why any kind of alcohol can be dangerous for a diabetic.
Okay, now that I understand that a lot better, now that will explain a lot of things in life.
Right. So this segment of what we call 0-0 wine, or zero alcohol, 0 calories, is growing at about 10% But that's kind of interesting because it doesn't really exist.
Right.
Like they're making a wine that does not have alcohol in it is very challenging.
Exactly, because you got to convert that sugar.
Well, we've had non-alcohol beer for quite some time with like old duels and O'Duels and stuff like that. And we're getting better. Like Heineken has a 0.0 beer that's actually not bad. It kind of tastes like beer. But 0.0 in wine has been really tough. So there's no way to make a wine without creating the alcohol, right? Like that's what's going on. The yeast is eating the sugar in the grapes, creating the fermentation process. So heat and CO2 is being released. Alcohol is being created during that process. We can't make a wine without going through that, but we're trying to create wine that then has no alcohol in it. So what they're doing, and initially what they did was they would boil the wine. Like they would heat it up and alcohol evaporates before a lot of other things. So they would heat it up to a specific temperature, let the alcohol evaporate, and then they would bottle the remaining liquid as a low alcohol wine.
Interesting.
Now, one of the things that I hope you know about in wine is that we don't typically want to heat it up.
Yes.
Not a great idea.
Yeah.
Changes a lot of the different compounds in there that are very complex that happen during that fermentation process. So you basically destroy the wine to heat it up to do that.
Yep.
And that's what existed for a very long time. Now they have what they call a vacuum distillation process.
Okay.
So they can suck all the air out of the system so that they're in a vacuum environment. Now when they heat it up, they don't need to heat it up nearly as high because the lower vacuum pressure, the atmospheric pressure is less. So the alcohol is going to boil at a much lower temperature. So that's what they're doing now. And they can remove most of the alcohol from the wine without having to boil it, which is good. So the rest of the compounds are much more stable and should be more like wine. But it's completely thrown out of balance now. So the alcohol provides a lot of the texture, the feeling, the viscosity of the liquid is all based off of that. And so now our wine is totally out of balance, where it no longer has the same feeling of wine.
Right.
It's a really challenging but growing category. Some of the people that are doing it the best are actually making things that are not wine. They're using tea and juice and other things to rebuild sort of the balance of the wine by adding tannins and sugar and acidity and things like that, and they're creating what they call proxies. So it's something similar to a wine. You drink it in a similar fashion. You enjoy it in a similar way. It's at a similar price point, but it's actually based on like teas and juices versus being a fermentation process.
Right. Interesting. So I've just lost every argument that I've ever had about calories in wine. Thank you very much. But it's very informative because actually what you just said there makes complete sense. Now, the one question I do have, because alcohol does burn at a higher point than, say, the hot dog does.
You mean a different temperature?
Yeah, different temperature. So does that actually go on count of the calories, where it doesn't matter the temperature of the fly or the combustion? It's still how long it takes to boil that water.
I'm not sure that that's true. I don't think combustion happens at different temperatures.
Okay.
Not specifically.
Well, I know that, for example, diesel fuel combusts at a different temperature than regular gasoline does.
Yeah. I mean, as long as there's any kind of heat being generated, even if there was no flame, and I don't think there is like an actual flame. I think they're just heating it up to the point where it's combusting. But the heat is what we're looking at, the heat transfer. So calories is really just a measure of energy, and the energy is a unit of heat.
Interesting.
In a lot of ways.
I just learned, I mean, again, this is what this whole podcast is about, is learning. And I just learned something amazing right there. Yeah. So I'm writing that down in the back of my head, way back in the back.
Yeah. So it's interesting though, because it is such a growing category, and yet it seems impossible. So what's really going on then? Marketing. It's just marketing, right? Like low sulfites in wine. Like you can't produce a wine that doesn't have sulfites.
Right.
It's a byproduct of fermentation.
You have to. It's going to be there. So.
And you want it there. It's protecting it so that you actually like are going to be able to drink it and not have it go bad. But in the 80s and kind of 90s, sulfates were sort of demonized as causing headaches in wine. And so that's where we got like a lot of that pushback, and the marketing became, oh, this is a low sulfite or no added. So like nobody's going to put extra sulfites in the wine if it doesn't need to be there.
Right.
You only want to use just enough.
That's a whole different topic right there. There's people out there that says, hey, I've got this little thing here that'll wash away the sulfites in there. And I'm like, but that's going to change the way the wine tastes if you take the sulfates out.
Oh, you mean like the little gimmicks and things where yeah, I don't know that those are removing sulfites, like unless it's a physical chemical reaction, like it's not.
There's a company out there, and I can't remember the name. They actually say they have a little contraption. You pour your wine through it, it removes all the sulfates, but keeps the wine the way they taste.
Yeah.
And I can't get hold of them, and because I want to check it out.
I mean, I don't know what they would be pouring, unless it went through a filter of some kind. It wouldn't be removing anything.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's another topic for another episode. Because I mean, we can definitely get on a soapbox on that one. We could discuss that one in very great lengths. So
let's just say that there's a lot of marketing in wine, and that wine is a very big category with a lot of niches within it. And so there's a lot of companies that are marketing to very specific niches within that to appeal, whether it's organic or biodynamic or sustainable or whatever. There's all these terms that are essentially marketing terms that are going after specific groups. But I can tell you that there's no winemaker anywhere in the world that is putting stuff in their wine unless they really feel like it needs to be there.
Correct.
And they're never going to put more than they would need to put into it, because one, they're very expensive. Like, you don't just throw away stuff to put it in the wine.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So Austin, I really appreciate you allowing us to come here to sit down and talk to us and really debunk this whole no calories in wine thing. I literally lost every argument. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I'm trying to think. So we have like what we call no calorie sweeteners, right? Like Splenda, yeah, and things like that, right? Like the reason that those are no calories is because our body cannot process them, right? Like even though if you heated it up, it might have some sort of a flame that would heat the water, but our body can't use them. So maybe there's a way that we could use those things in wine, but I mean, yeast are not going to eat those to create alcohol. So
I'm sorry, I did the Splenda thing when I was diabetic, and yeah. I'd rather have regular sugar and just deal with the diabetes.
Everything in moderation.
Exactly.
Especially wine.
Exactly. Well, so real quick, we're going to get a quick shout out to our sponsors. So we got Texas Wine Lover app. And are you signed up? You got your little spot on Texas
Absolutely.
Wine?
Yeah, we're listed on there. And
awesome.
Jeff's been through a number of times, and I've met a number of the people that do articles for them. Very happy to see their success over the years. I think they're doing great.
Jeff is an amazing guy. We call him the Godfather. Because I mean, anytime we need something, you call the Godfather to get what you need, and this is what you need here, and then of course we have Fly with Wine. Have you heard of these guys?
No, that's new for me.
So let's say you take a trip to South Africa, you get some wine that you want to bring back to the States. Well, you're going to have to ship it by FedEx or UPS.
Yeah, it can be challenging. Usually they use DHL down there.
Yeah, so get you a suitcase from Fly with Wine. You can get you the biggest suitcase, which holds a case of wine. And you can ship it back on your check-in, and it's protected.
What do you do about customs when you're only allowed 2 bottles?
Well, you just don't tell them.
Most of the time is if you're honest with them and tell them that you're over the limit, that they'll just let you through. But, but you can always just pay the tax.
Yeah, I mean, but still, doing your check-in is a lot cheaper, and you get it quicker than have to ship it to DHL or FedEx or UPS. Because it's going to be a couple of weeks before you get it.
I mean, months probably.
Yeah,
and but it's very challenging. So alcohol laws in the United States are archaic, and it's very different than when I was doing imports into China and into Taiwan. So we have a lot of issues bringing wine over, and if you travel abroad and buy a bunch of wine and ship it, then technically you need an import license to get it in. So it can be very expensive to ship wine from abroad. which is why we do that difficult work for you. So if you go to South Africa and you want to get a bunch of wine, then you can just come here and pick it up when you get back.
There you go. Well, but if you want to go in and try some and bring back, you can use Fly with Wine, get this suitcase, holds a case of wine, bring it back, try it out. It saves that trouble.
I actually need one of those. I think the most I've ever come back with was 36.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
But still, if you had a suitcase, check it in, it just costs you the check-in bag, which would probably be the same cost of shipping it through.
Oh, it's much cheaper. Shipping from South Africa is crazy expensive.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. I mean, that just solved your problem right there.
The last case that we shipped here, I think I spent nearly $500 and took a very long time, including getting held up in customs, even with all the right paperwork.
Let's see, if you had the suitcase,
Yeah.
the minute you landed and you picked it up, you could be drinking the wine on your way back.
Hopefully not while you're driving.
Who said anything about driving? All right. So as we're coming to close of this podcast, Austin, you've been very, very amazing host here for us. We really enjoyed the stories that you told us. I mean, and this is the one thing I love about doing this podcast. I get to know more about the story than what's actually on your website. I get to do general research about you, but get to sit here to actually know more about your story, about who you are, where you came from. It's so much more richer, and I love that part about it. So again, thank you for having us here. But our wine quotes for this week, are you ready for these?
I am, yeah. I'm excited for this.
So I am not addicted to wine, okay? We're just in a committed relationship. And then this one right here made me think a little bit. So we'll see what happens. My stream of consciousness is running dry and urgently needs to be reliquefied by some wine. Preferably it's red.
Okay. That one's kind of more of a mouthful, but yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of big words in there.
There's a lot of amazing quotes and amazing people that have said amazing things about wine. It's just such a storied and historic and traditional part of our culture and being that, there's an endless amount of information there. So,
I will say this about the quotes. It's really hard to find a male-driven quote because all the quotes out there are female-driven quotes.
Interesting.
And I love doing these quotes, but I have to go out there and find these because there's been a couple of them that are female driven that are really funny, but having a male read the female quote, it just
doesn't hit the same way.
It doesn't hit the same way. So also, I appreciate you allowing us to come out here and sit down and talk with you. Your story is amazing. I really enjoyed it. So this is We Know Texas Vino, and this is Will signing off. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.